With the authority of the Council, I shall now confer the degree of Doctor of the University. I call upon the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Roy Webb, to read the citation.
Chancellor, the Council of the University has resolved to award the degree of Doctor of the University to the Right Reverend Keith Rayner, AO. Keith Rayner was born in 1929 in Brisbane and was educated at the Church of England Grammar School. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Queensland in 1951 and with a Doctor of Philosophy in 1963. His doctoral thesis was on the history of the Anglican Church in Queensland. He studied theology at St Francis College and the Australian College of Theology in Brisbane and was ordained deacon and priest at Brisbane's St John's Cathedral in 1953. He began his service in the Anglican Church in the same year as curate of the parish of Auchenflower and served in that capacity until 1954, when he became chaplain of St Francis College. Keith Rayner served as a member of the Brotherhood of St John in Dalby from 1955 to 1958. He became Vice Warden of St John's College in Brisbane in 1958, and after receiving a Rotary Foundation Fellowship, studied at Harvard from 1958 to 59. On his return, he became Vicar of the parish of Sunnybank and stayed in that role until 1963. He was appointed chaplain of Postulants Guild in Brisbane in 1961 and rector of the parish of Wynnum in 1963 and served in these roles until 1969. He also served as examining chaplain responsible for training younger priests from 1968 to 69. Dr. Rayner was consecrated as bishop by Archbishop Sir Frank Woods in Melbourne in 1969. He went to the northeast Victorian city of Wangaratta, where he served as diocesan bishop for 6 years, setting up close relationships between bishop, clergy and laity. In his role as Archbishop of Adelaide from 1975, he oversaw the complete restructure of the diocese, setting up an annual youth conference and established a commission on marriage and divorce. 15 years later, in 1990, he was transferred to the Diocese of Melbourne to serve as the Archbishop of Melbourne and Metropolitan of the Province of Victoria. Keith Rayner became Primate of the Anglican Church in 1992, having served as acting Primate for the best part of 3 years. For many years before that, he was viewed as a leading figure in Anglicanism, both in Australia and in the world communion. On his retirement, Keith Rayner was publicly farewelled in St Paul's Cathedral in Melbourne on November 21 in 1999, at a service in which he preached his final sermon as Archbishop. During his long and devoted service to the Anglican Church, Dr. Rayner also served as President of the Christian Conference of Asia from 1977 to 81 and Chair of the Inter-Anglican Theological and Doctrinal Commission from 1981 to 1988. In 1988, he was Chairman of the Organising Committee for the Lambeth Conference of the Bishops of the Worldwide Anglican Communion at Canterbury in Britain. Dr. Rayner is the only bishop in Australia at present who has served as diocesan in 3 sees and only the second in Australian history to move from one metropolitan see to another. As Archbishop and Primate, Dr. Rayner dealt with a number of difficult and controversial issues within the Church and society. Dr. Rayner brought a progressive approach to the Church and was a strong supporter of the ordination of women and of Aboriginal reconciliation. His incisive mind, strong and effective leadership, clear vision and unfailing good humour enabled him to steer the Australian Anglican Church through a period of passionate disagreements and uncertainties. Victorian Governor James Gobbo described Keith Rayner as, and I quote, a man of deep spirituality with a powerful mind linked to a human sensitivity to the needs of ordinary people. Keith Rayner's contributions to the Anglican Church and to the community have been recognised by the award of Doctor of Theology, honoris causa, by the Australian College of Theology, and by the award of the honour of Officer of the Order of Australia in 1987. It is fitting that Griffith University should honour Keith Rayner in recognition of his distinguished service to the community. Chancellor, it is with the greatest pleasure that I present to you the Right Reverend Keith Rayner, AO, for admission to the degree of Doctor of the University.
I'd now like to call upon the Right Reverend Keith Rayner, AO, Doctor of the University, to deliver the occasional address.
Chancellor, Vice-Chancellor, members of the Council of the University, distinguished guests and graduates and ladies and gentlemen. I'm deeply honoured to be admitted to the degree of Doctor of the University, and I thank this university for its generous recognition. Although for more than 30 years my ministry as Bishop and later Primate of the Anglican Church has been exercised in other states, my formation for that role in family, school, university, theological college and parish ministry all took place in Queensland. Indeed, my first parish of Sunnybank embraced within its boundaries an area which subsequently became the Nathan campus of this university. So for me, this is a homecoming of a particularly pleasant kind. It was under the auspices of the Church that the ancient universities of Europe were established, and theology was a major discipline. It has been very different in Australia. 19th century Australia was avowedly secular in its educational philosophy, and the older Australian universities rigidly excluded theology from their curricula. It was part of an understandable reaction against the heavy-handed dominance of the English universities by the established Church. But it fostered an attitude that theology was not a respectable academic discipline. This had consequences for the Church because its future clergy were trained, for the most part, in an environment sheltered from the cut and thrust of intellectual debate. I venture to suggest it has also had consequences for universities and for the wider community in which universities form the educational pinnacle. It has meant that not only theology, but the entire spiritual dimension of life have been seriously neglected in university research and teaching. A number of the newer universities, established after World War II, and not least this university, have been more liberal in their attitudes, encouraged perhaps by the competition for student enrolments, and have given theology a place, but older attitudes have died hard. There's a healthy public debate on education in Australia today. The slogans abound: clever country, knowledge nation, the new economy are the catchcries. And this concern to develop knowledge, cleverness and technological skills is fine. And you, whom we congratulate on your graduation in commerce and management, are tangible fruits of that concern. But is this all that matters? I want to suggest that, important as knowledge is, there is something more important: wisdom. True, you cannot have wisdom without knowledge, but you can certainly have knowledge without wisdom. Indeed, the cultivation of research at great depth into ever narrower subjects of inquiry can sometimes issue in profound knowledge of a minuscule area of life, and great foolishness about life as a whole. Leo Tolstoy wrote in War and Peace that the highest wisdom has but one science, the science of the whole, the science explaining the whole creation and man's part in it. Wisdom implies wholeness, balance, judicious discernment. Knowledge may be merely a matter of quantity of information, and I confess to some skepticism about the assumption that the possibility of acquiring vast amounts of knowledge from the internet will by itself make us a more educated people. It's not simply knowledge, but the ability to sift it and organize it and integrate it into a total understanding of the whole that is important. That is what goes to make up wisdom. An important component of wisdom is experience, which is why some people of limited academic education can yet be remarkably wise. The great mistake of our age is to confine relevant experience to that of our own generation and of those aspects of life which are subject to measurement and scientific research. We take into our mind new knowledge all the time, and we pride ourselves on how much we've discovered. What we fail to realize is that while new knowledge comes in by the front door of our mind, old knowledge and the wisdom related to it often slide unnoticed out the back door. There is an accumulated wisdom of the ages which we lose at great cost to the quality of our human life. Not the least of this accumulated wisdom is the persistent sense of the spiritual and the sacred, which refuses to accept that material things form the sum total of life. We need bread to live, but the conviction that people do not live by bread alone has been deeply embedded in human consciousness from primitive times. It finds expression in creative arts and music and literature. And above all, it manifests itself in religion, through which people reverence and acknowledge in worship the transcendent reality which is the ground of our being and the source of all human creativity. That reality I'm not ashamed to call God, a God who evokes not only intellectual assent, but worship, trust, and love. I believe that whatever has been useful in my life has come about because I have sought, often falteringly, to respond to God's graciousness in creating, challenging, and sustaining me. Most of you who graduate tonight will live your lives in the competitive world of business and management. You will naturally have ambitions to succeed, and your peers will judge your success chiefly by the salary you earn, the profits you achieve for your organization, and the hard work and competence by which you hopefully rise to the top. It may be that your organizations will ask of you a certain ruthlessness and a readiness to put the organization before everything else, including family, friends, proper leisure, health, and even sanity. Some may find themselves pressed to succeed by methods that are unethical. It's no coincidence that one of the growth industries in Australia over the past decade has been that of business ethics. It has grown because of a perceived need. It raises questions not only about honesty in business, but of values in general. Is the generation of profit the criterion of success? Are market forces to be the sole or even the primary determinant of activity? Is mutual loyalty between employers and employees no longer an issue? Does business have social obligations to the community? Questions like these matter. They determine the kind of community we become, and surely that is of supreme importance. All human activity in every sphere of life, including business, should have as its goal the creation of a community which is wholesome, balanced, and harmonious, in which people matter, and individual lives can be as full and contented as possible. It comes down to values. But values ultimately reflect beliefs. It's what we believe about life, its purpose, and the means by which that purpose is fulfilled that shapes our values. In the end, in the broadest sense of the word, that is the religious question. David Tacey of La Trobe University has written of contemporary Australia, "So many of our social and political problems stem from the loss or absence of a living and sustaining religious vision." I believe that is profoundly true, and it has in fact been the underlying conviction behind my involvement in public life as a church leader. I believe the church has a significant part to play in public life, not because it is always right, and not to further the interests of the church as an institution, but because it is important always to keep the question of values and the underlying beliefs that shape values to the fore in the public square. Often we are accused of shallowness because technical issues are involved, of which we are ignorant. Certainly the church, like any other participant in public discussion, has the responsibility to be well informed on technical matters. But politics, business, economics, genetics, and the rest are not simply objective, value-free activities. Underlying the decisions that are made are value judgments, and the people who are most guilty of self-deception are those who imagine that the decisions they make are based simply on technical considerations. A former premier of the state in which I worked once dismissed the church as yesterday's people. Well, he is now yesterday's premier. But I do not take his comment entirely amiss. There is a wisdom from the past which is entirely relevant to the present. And however clever and knowledgeable we become in the future, that wisdom will continue to speak with power. For the most profound understanding comes when the whole of human experience is brought to bear, and that includes not only the capacities of mind and body, but also the receptiveness of the human spirit to the reality of the divine. It is for this wholeness of life that I plead. I see it as true wisdom, and I thank the university that in honouring me tonight, you have tacitly testified to the place of the things of the Spirit in human life.